Where backstage dealings often go unseen by fans, a silent war had been raging, one not fought in the ring, but in minds and wills. For months, wrestling executives, corporate masterminds, and shadowy psychological operations specialists believed they had done the impossible. They thought they had broken Brock Lesnar, the Beast, the unstoppable force who once tore through every opponent with raw, unfiltered aggression and athletic dominance. They thought their months-long campaign of humiliation, mental manipulation, and mind control had crushed him, reduced him from a legitimate fighting machine to a malleable corporate asset, an obedient puppet who would never again threaten their carefully maintained authority. A brutal backstage attack, unlike any other. The parking garage beneath WWE's imposing headquarters served as the grim theater for one of the most brutal, meticulously executed backstage assaults in wrestling history. At exactly 11:23 p.m., under the cold, unforgiving glare of fluorescent lights and the echoing emptiness of concrete walls, Brock Lesnar struck with an icy precision that sent a chilling message to everyone involved in the twisted psychological games that had plagued the industry. Bronson Reed was there, seemingly relaxed, yet deeply enmeshed in the darkest facets of corporate psychological warfare. He was meeting with a group of international operatives, the handlers behind the curtain, receiving his next assignment. Reed's role was sinister, an enforcer, a muscle man who weaponized intimidation to prepare other wrestlers for the mind control programs that sought to erase their independence and turn them into docile corporate tools. On this night, however, his arrogance and casual celebration of his deeds would be his undoing. The calm before the storm, Reed's fatal mistake. Witnesses later described Reed as unnervingly comfortable, even jovial, laughing with his handlers about the devastating effectiveness of their psychological manipulation campaigns. They joked about new targets for systematic mind control, treating the mental destruction of their colleagues as a strategic game, a grotesque form of corporate entertainment at the expense of human dignity. But the moment that would shatter Reed's illusion began with a sound. The slow, measured footsteps of someone who wasn't rushing or angry, but deliberately savoring each step. It was the approach of a predator who had spent months planning this moment down to the smallest detail. A hunter who carried not only the will to punish, but evidence, damning proof, that would expose Reed's complicity in these dark operations. Bronson Reed, the muscle behind the mind control. As Brock confronted Reed, his voice cut through the stale air of the parking garage with a fury that was equal parts rage and righteous justice. This was no theatrical promo or wrestling bravado. This was a man who had been systematically tortured and mentally broken by the very programs Reed had helped enforce, and now sought to repay that pain in full measure. Reed's role was laid bare. He wasn't just a wrestler turned corporate enforcer. He was a professional torturer, using his intimidating physical presence to prepare victims for the psychological onslaught that followed. Wrestlers like Jacob Fatu, Roman Reigns, and CM Punk had been softened up by Reed's calculated aggression before being subjected to advanced conditioning and pharmaceutical mind control. The terror tactics, threats against family and loved ones. Perhaps the most despicable element of Reed's participation was revealed in the way he weaponized fear, not just against wrestlers, but their families. Threats against innocent children and spouses were standard operating procedure, designed to create psychological vulnerabilities that could be exploited during conditioning. Roman Reigns, Jacob Fatu, and others had faced direct intimidation aimed at their loved ones, making resistance nearly impossible. Brock's words hung heavy in the air. "You threatened wrestlers' families." This wasn't just corporate misconduct or career sabotage. It was a form of terrorism, designed to break the human spirit by attacking the most sacred bonds. It was calculated cruelty on a scale few could fathom. The corruption of loyalty. Money as the ultimate weapon. The dark money trail behind Reed's betrayal added another layer to the horror. He wasn't ideologically driven. He was a mercenary, bought and paid for. Bonus payments of $500,000 for each wrestler successfully intimidated and up to $1 million for each mind broken revealed the systematic financial corruption fueling the corporate torture apparatus. Reed was a weapon for hire, purchased like a piece of equipment needed to maintain control over the wrestling industry. Money had corrupted not only his loyalty, but his very humanity, transforming him into a professional torturer who preyed on his colleagues for personal gain. The attack, systematic justice delivered. But Brock Lesnar's assault was no mindless, rage-fueled brawl. Witnesses who later reviewed the security footage described the attack as an expertly choreographed act of justice, the culmination of months of planning and focused determination. Every strike Brock delivered was surgical. Every bone he broke served a purpose: to dismantle Reed's ability to intimidate, to erase his value as a corporate enforcer, and to ensure that Reed could never again participate in the systematic torture of others. Medical experts analyzing the footage marveled at the clinical precision with which Brock targeted Reed's physical capabilities, destroying his menace in a way that spoke to a deep understanding of both anatomy and the psychological impact of violence. The voice of justice. Words that cut deeper than fists. What made the assault even more harrowing was Brock's verbal accompaniment to each injury. With a voice cold and controlled, he made sure Reed understood exactly why he was being destroyed. "This is for every wrestler you intimidated," Brock's voice echoed through the garage. "This is for every family you threatened. This is for every mind you helped break." His words transformed the beating from an act of revenge into an educational statement on justice and accountability. It was a lesson delivered in pain, meant to ensure Reed grasped the full consequences of his actions, both physical and moral. A message to the puppet masters. The war has begun. Brock's most chilling moment came when he turned his gaze to the surveillance cameras monitoring the garage. Speaking directly to the unseen corporate executives, handlers, and conspirators who had orchestrated the torture programs, he issued a clear and deadly warning. This message is for everyone who participated in systematic torture programs. Every executive who authorized psychological warfare, every operative who implemented mind control, every handler who managed torture operations, prepare yourselves. You will face the same justice as Reed. This declaration elevated Brock's assault beyond personal revenge. It was a declaration of war against the entire corporate conspiracy that had nearly destroyed him and countless others. The beginning of a new war. As Brock left the garage that night, leaving Bronson Reed broken and powerless behind him, he made it unmistakably clear that this was only the beginning. The campaign against the shadowy psychological warfare networks would continue, systematic and relentless. "This is day one of systematic justice," Brock announced, knowing that his message had been recorded and would echo through corporate corridors worldwide. Every person who participated in psychological warfare against wrestlers will be found, held accountable, and eliminated as a threat to performer safety and mental health. The wrestling world struggled to absorb the full implications, but amid the shock and awe, one thing was clear: some people cannot be broken by torture, and those people will make sure justice is delivered, no matter the cost. Final thoughts. The legacy of resistance. Bronson Reed's downfall was more than a personal reckoning. It was a symbolic victory for every wrestler who had been pushed to the edge by psychological manipulation. Brock Lesnar's brutal and systematic elimination of a corporate terrorist sent a message that no amount of money, power, or intimidation could silence those who refused to be broken. The Beast had returned, stronger, wiser, and fueled by a righteous fury that would shake the very foundations of the wrestling industry. His war against corporate torture programs had begun, and the world was watching.